time to rethink, reboot, reset our priorities in certain ways. With anxiety in times like this, we tend to go higher and deeper. And when we go higher, we tend to pull back and look at the big picture. And when we go deeper, we tend to look at ourselves and how we're going to react to that. I think part of rebooting or repacking is to look at, am I living in the place I love? Am I with the people I love, the tribe we talked about? Am I doing the work I love? Do I have a reason to get up in the morning? Do I have a sense of purpose? I call it the life reimagined process. But let me give a caveat or a warning. The process works. Unequivocally, the process works if you work the process.
Helping you find your new way forward to the best years of your life. This is a New Way Forward podcast with your host, Paul Long.
Purpose. Purpose, purpose, purpose. Live on purpose. Live with purpose. What does that mean? How do I do it? Well, in this interview, Richard Leider will take it from the esoteric notion and make it very real, along with the benefits and along with the methods and processes with which to achieve it. Richard is the founder of Inventure, the Purpose Company. He's ranked by Forbes as one of the top 5 most respected executive coaches and by the Conference Board as a legend in coaching. He's a thought leader who's worked with over 100,000 leaders from over 100 organizations, written 10 books, selling millions, including The Power of Purpose and the PBS companion television show. Also repacking your bags, and he's working on his 11th, which is Who Do You Want to Be When You Grow Old? The Art of Aging on Purpose. So get out pen and paper and get ready to take notes, because this is going to be incredibly useful and insightful for you. And we start out with his take on how to deal with these incredibly chaotic and disruptive and fearful times.
There is so much uncertainty, so much even helplessness that so many people are feeling in their lives anyway, or certainly in this latter phase of life when you learn that there's a lot more to it than you thought there would. But now you add on everything from the coronavirus pandemic and the massive changes that are affecting us right now and will long term, but also the situation with George Floyd in Minneapolis, with all of the protests that are going on around the world. Going back to that uncertainty and powerlessness, what do you do about that? How do you handle that?
Well, when in times of change, the way that I view it, and I think we all, by the way, we all have anxiety, regardless of our situation. It depends on where you live, what your experience has been like, what you make of it. I mean, everybody's an experiment of one. But with anxiety in times like this, we tend to go higher and deeper. And when we go higher, we tend to pull back and look at the big picture. And when we go deeper, we tend to look at ourselves and how we're going to react to that. And so when you go deeper, if you haven't done much reflection and you're not clear about purpose and values and what you really stand for and things like that, it's more difficult. Because the only certainty you can have is your own choices. It's like I spent a week with Viktor Frankl, the concentration camp survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, who said the last of the human freedoms is choice, to choose what you want your life to be about, regardless of the circumstances. And he was using the concentration camp, obviously. And he said between stimulus and response, there's a gap or a space. And in that gap is our freedom to choose how we're going to react to that stimulus, what our reaction is going to be. And that's what is up for people now, all of us. And there's anxiety. It's like being between 2 trapezes, where we're letting go of something on the one hand, and we're reaching out to grasp for something that hopefully is certain and we can hang on to on the other hand, but it's not certain. And the ending's not certain either. We don't know what the future is going to be like. They talk about the new normal. Well, it's not going to be the new normal. It's going to be the new abnormal or the new something. But it's not going to be like a new version of normal, I don't think it's going to be that way at all, or I don't see it that way. Everybody's, as I said, is an experiment of one. So one of the things to do is this: isolation is fatal. Being in that middle of that those two trapezes, don't go it alone. Have minimally a committed listener or a sounding board, somebody to talk with, so that you've got some sense of that you're not in this alone, and that we can hopefully figure this out together. And every politician, every preacher today says, we'll figure this out together. I think that's true, but we have to all decide what together looks like and who we're going to be with in that together. So there's a lot of ways to go, but I'll just say that I find myself, my own life has been a mixed bag during this time period. I mean, I write about this, I've studied this, and yet when I'm in the middle of it, I'm experimenting with my own practices, and shifting to working at home is pretty easy. But I truly miss the physical presence of being with people and the nuances of that. And so anxiety is there. And I've never, since I was 15 years old, I've never been without a job. I've worked since I was 15. Well, now you could say, I mean, I do certain things, but it's really not the same. And I don't know if it'll ever be the same again. It remains to be seen in terms of the real work that I love to do and got me up every morning to do. So there's got to be a new reason to get up in the morning now.
So I think of people in a lot of these situations in terms of you know, how do I even get started? How do I even sort this out? I mean, what's my first step? Yes, great, I can get with somebody, but I don't even know how to begin.
Yeah.
I mean, what would be your suggestion for just a starting point, that first big step?
Yeah. Well, I think there are 3 steps or 3 points to unlocking or to remember when the lockdown ends, or now, both. It's both. Number 1 is to have a reason to get up in the morning, and only you can choose that. When we get up, we want to be happy, right? We want to feel good. We don't want to have anxiety. And to be happy, when you look at all the happiness research, it boils down to 2 things: to belong and to matter. So to get up in the morning, we need to feel like we belong, and we connect with others in some way, and that we matter. We're doing something that makes a difference. So we need something to look forward to. If you want a good night's sleep, have a good reason to get up in the morning. And so one of the things to do is to show gratitude to others, to thank somebody with that reason to get up in the morning. If you say, oh, how do I get up in the morning? You know, why do I get up? Focusing on others reduces your anxiety. Focusing your attention on others reduces depression. And reduces worry and stress. So if you want to stay sane and aid your own pandemic recovery, be grateful and make a difference in somebody else's life. And so having a reason to get up in the morning is really what purpose is all about. Purpose is our aim, what our life is about. And so when we get up in the morning, what are the choices? Like Viktor Frankl said, the freedom. What are the choices we're going to make? And if we make a choice outside of our own anxiety, outside of our own self-absorption, to reach out to somebody else, anxiety tends to reduce. Doesn't go away, but it tends to be manageable a little bit more easily. So that's one thing. So does that make sense? You want to go anywhere else?
No, that does make sense. And I also on my own, I'm going to throw in, you know, what's your intention? And when you talk about Viktor Frankl and what he did, and what this reminds me of is Esther Perel, if I'm saying her last name correctly, who's Belgian, and her parents were Holocaust survivors, and she grew up in a community of Holocaust survivors, and she just made this stunning point to me. She said there were two types of Holocaust survivor. There were those who survived, and there were those who went on with their lives, lived
Right.
as a result of their survival. And that just strikes me as a point that we all have to make, especially in troubling times. But heck, even in our own lives, are we just going to be victims, however justified, and being a Holocaust survivor is a lot of
Right.
justification, or am I going to do something with it?
Right. And I know Esther, and I know her work, and I've taught with her as recently as last January. And I agree with that notion. And what does it mean to thrive or to not just survive? And part of that is not just living a good life, a fulfilling life, a happy life. Those people got together, they had dinners together, but they supported each other. They were there for each other. They saw that sense of thriving as being connected and not just the good life. I'm just going to enjoy my life like a bucket list or something like that. It wasn't that. And so that aim, as E.B. White said, I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, for those people, they both saved and savored. They wanted to savor life because it was precious and they knew it, and they survived, and many millions that didn't. But they also wanted to save, not in a literal sense, but in a making a difference sense with others. And they saw that that's really the essence of community.
Yes, a tribe, which is so
Tribe.
important for us, and even goes back to your point, and I
Yep.
love it, of being on the two swinging, trapeze
Yeah.
extensions, and
Right.
you're right here. So are you going to have somebody there to catch you, or
Right.
are you going to fall, or are you going to be the just survive and just stay on that one thing, which is pretty damn boring after a while.
Yeah. Right.
So
the second one, then.
Oh,
you
yeah,
want to go to
please,
number
please.
two?
Yeah.
So I said there were three, but the second one is the bookend of the first one, and that is, so the first one is have a reason to get up in the morning. The second one is have more purpose moments, which is really what I was driving into. A purpose moment is where you step in to make a difference in someone's life. There are 1,441 purpose moments in a day. If you take sleep, that reduces that radically. But we need more emotional contact, not emotional contagion. What we have now is emotional contagion. You read the news and it's like, oh, the sky is falling, which it is. But emotional contagion is where we then pass it, we pass on our stress, our worries, our anxieties to others. But we need more positive, make a difference, emotional contact with others. So a purpose moment is that emotional contact where you give somebody else a kind word, a listening, a crust of bread. As Viktor Frankl, back to him, said in the concentration camp, he could give others that kind word, that crust of bread, that slurp of soup, that hope for the future, that dream, even humor helped him and them survive in certain ways. So the number one stress buster that beats all the others, number one stress buster that beats all the others is that emotional contact. It's that make a difference for someone and get out of your own way. And social media, doesn't always bring us closer. Now we rely on it just like we are now, but people often curate what they're saying, and as opposed to being vulnerable and all of that. So hard to know exactly how to get this emotional contact right now with social distancing and physical distancing and all that. But we do know this, that purpose is a verb. It's compassion in action. It's that emotional contact in action. And as an introvert myself, on the Myers-Briggs or anything else, or a self-described introvert, I have a newfound appreciation for emotional contact after being self-quarantined or being isolated for this time. For those in-person get-togethers, we had I live in a small community out rural in Minnesota, And there are 9 homes, and we had a Zoom annual meeting of the 9 homeowners on Saturday. But then we all went out and walked on our driveways or our rural road here, maintaining social distance, and talked with each other. It was so good to see people in person, even though we weren't hugging or we weren't, but we all brought out a glass of wine and had our own and kind of toasted each other from afar. And just being in the same physical space was kind of a big breakthrough. So have more of those kinds of purpose moments, knowing that isolation is fatal. That'd be the second thing.
And number 3?
Number 3 is really controversial. Have less stuff. Have less stuff. We need less stuff than we think. I have found I don't wear any of the clothes that are in my closet right now. I shouldn't say any of them, but hardly any of them. I'm wearing the same thing most days, doing things. I'm looking at all the clothes, and I'm not a clothes horse, so I don't have, but I'm just, and I look at stuff and say, how much stuff am I really need? So it's time to rethink, reboot, reset our priorities in certain ways. And that pandemic, I think, has driven for many people, obviously out of work. There's a lot of anxiety around this, but just the whole notion of, well, what is the good life? And you and I have talked about this before, but I wrote a book, co-authored a book called Repacking Your Bags, Lighten Your Load for the Good Life. And the good life, lighten your load, is what I'm suggesting here. And studies on happiness, studies have found that kindness, generosity, kind of purpose moments that we were talking about, make us happier than buying stuff. Nothing's wrong with stuff, but it doesn't really fit the bill. And so my notion here is consume less, give more. And when I look at the good life, I look at unpacking and repacking. So to unpack, when we wrote the book, The Good Life, which has sold 1 million copies in 20 languages and continues to sell, Lighten Your Load, there are 4 ingredients to the good life beyond health and money, which are obviously big anxiety producers for people and big notions. But beyond that, there's living in the place you love, with the people you love, doing the work you love with intention, with purpose. So I think part of rebooting or repacking is to look at, am I living in the place I love? Am I with the people I love, the tribe we talked about? Am I doing the work I love? Do I have a reason to get up in the morning? Do I have a sense of purpose? So I think when I say have less stuff, it's about really rebooting or relooking, stepping back and looking at, so what is your vision of the good life? And are you living it? And if not, is there a reason to reprioritize at this point? And maybe consume less, give more.
Now I can almost imagine some people having a minor anxiety attack, going, he's right. It is these 4 things. No, 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 no. OMG, what the hell am I going to do? Or even if it's 1 or 2 or 3, and it's just like, but it'd be monumental. I'm so committed to this, or I have to be here for. I'm a big believer in concentrate on the first 1% rather than the whole thing, because if you think about, I got to lose 200 pounds, forget it. But if I think about today, I'm going to lose an ounce. How would I move forward with this, especially if my mind is screaming at me, no way. That sounds nice, but there's no way you can do that.
Yeah. Well, here's the process. I call it the Life Reimagined process. But let me give a caveat or a warning. The process works. Unequivocally, the process works if you work the process. So in other words, you can't just think about it, you got to do it, act. So here's the 6 steps in the process. First is reflect, and you can reflect on your priorities. Second is connect and talk about it with somebody, have a conversation, have a team, have a process, have a tribe. Third is explore. And that is get out and start with the internet. And eventually, as we get moving here and post-pandemic, if whenever, explore your options to get out and look at things and visit people who are doing what you want to do, or places you want to go, or jobs you want to have. There's no way to do it just by sitting on your hands. And then the fourth step is to choose of your explorations. Where's one or two things you want to make a deeper dive and really get into and make a commitment to try it out? At least that 1% you're talking about, that one small step. And the fifth thing is to unpack. And that is to say, well, that's nice, but I don't have the money. Well, you have to look at your budget and say, what can I let go of here? What can I reduce in order to have? And not easy. This is not, or calendar. I don't have the time. Well, maybe something's got to go in your calendar. Or so unpacking. I know when I did the PBS special and went out to cities across the country on the power of purpose, I found so many people who, and I recommended this to people. I said, what do you mean by unpack? And I said, here's what I mean. You got this vision of the good life. Go home and take one drawer or one closet in your house and go through that drawer. Let's just pick a drawer. Go through that drawer and say everything in that, a junk drawer, let's say. Do I need this for my next vision of the good life, or is this just stuff I've accumulated? And so you start to put 3 boxes in front of you. Need this, don't need this, can't decide. And you put everything into one of those 3 boxes. And if it's the need list, it goes back in the drawer. If it's the not need list, you sell it or give it away. If it's you can't decide, put a date for a year or 6 months from now and relook at it later. Well, I had people from all over the planet tell me after the PBS special, when I said that, people in the audience, there's 500 people live in the audience, laughed when I said that. Then they went home and did that, and they'll say, well, I started with a drawer, then I moved to a closet, and pretty soon I sold my house because I realized I actually wasn't living the way I wanted or where I wanted, but it started with something real tangible. So repack means to unpack certain aspects. And then the final 6th step is to act. It's to actually move. So you can start anywhere in those 6. But generally, there's a pattern there that when I coach people, I try to help them figure out some sort of map of where they are, what they need to do. And process works if you work the process, but it's not easy.
And
Does that help? Does that help?
It couldn't have been better. Take a cup of flour and so on and so forth, and you will have brownies. And so you did give a recipe. I mean, that's solid. That is really, that's what I love about it, is that it's not this esoteric, follow your passion, do your dream. You know, you gave me something I can hang my hat on.
It's hard work. It's hard work, and there's blocks all along the way. But without that, you'll end up living somebody else's vision of the good life. And you'll wake up when you're 40, 50, or 60 in a midlife, what used to be called a midlife crisis, now called a later life crisis or slump. And you'll wonder why, and then you'll unpack at that point. And it could be oftentimes like a pandemic, cancer or illness, disability, job loss. I mean, something will trigger unpacking one way or another.
Yeah, and I can imagine a lot of people either, concerned about the discipline of doing something like that. I say, I'm a big fan of James Clear and his Atomic Habits, which is don't think about think about the 1%. If you're going to go work out at the gym every day for the next 30 days, don't think about the next 30 days. Think about at noon today, I'm putting my shoes on. I'm getting my keys. I'm going to show up for 15 minutes. Don't worry about the rest. But I also think about the fear, thinking, I'm going to have to deal with all this stuff. And in my life transition to this phase of life and doing Pro Boomer, I had to really go back, say, where is some of this baggage, emotional baggage, mental perception baggage, where'd it come from? Going back to childhood, going, that's why I'm that. But I got to tell you, I'm a little fearless anyway about that kind of thing. I can imagine a lot of people who had maybe traumatic childhoods and such, but it is it is worth it, because once you get past it,
Yeah.
once you even just realize what it is, it's almost a cause for celebration.
Well, and if the bag is packed, there's no room for new things to go in. It just adds more stress, like I don't have time. So something's got to give along the way. And so I find, there's a distinction between transitions and changes. Changes are happening on the outside to us all the time. What's happening in Minneapolis right now, what's happening with the pandemic, what's happening with aging. But transition is what's happening inside ourselves, the choices we make. And everyone's an experiment of one. This is not an easy thing, but it is a choice. And it's a choice that, as you said very clearly, to be a victim of it, or to be to activate.
To thrive. I liked your
And
word.
it has
Yeah.
a lot to do with our mindset, what our vision is of the good life. And, we've added three decades to life when you look at just pure raw data. And so pro-boomer, those boomers have 30 more, maybe 40 more years. So what's the purpose of greater longevity? What am I to do with this time? Is it just a extended vacation or extended retirement, or is there something else? Well, that's a mindset choice thing. But the biology of it is we're wired for purpose, and it's not going to go away. And so, I've been in the neuroscience labs. I've been with astronauts, and the chief of primary caregiver, the chief of medicine for the astronauts and their families at the Johnson Space Center, who is helping astronauts make the transition from walking on the moon to walking into the next phase of their life, so to speak. And he tipped me off to something that I have since studied called the overview effect. And the overview effect is that we just had a private SpaceX launch that went up to the space station. But he said that almost everybody who went into space came back with a shifted perspective. Can you imagine standing on the moon and looking into the black, except for this beautiful blue orb and maybe the sun, or it depends on the time. And they came back, and as they looked at that blue orb called Earth, they saw no boundaries. They saw somehow a fragility. They saw a fragile planet, and they wanted to come back and make a difference, to do something to that planet. I think that's what aging is about. That's what pro-boomer is about in certain ways, is not just enjoying and savoring life. That's a good thing, but also making a difference in certain ways. And so the overview effect is that shift in perspective that happens in space, but it can happen on Earth in a whole variety of ways. And crucibles are one way where that overview effect happens. The pandemic, I think, is an overview effect type of thing. Is showing us the interaction, the integration of all humanity.
Yeah, and this seems, and by the way, one of my favorite quotes of all time, and I've always been a space buff, but Apollo 8, which was the first time mankind had left Earth's orbit. That was the mission,
right,
in which they circled the moon. They did not land, and
right.
it was Bill Anders, who was on that crew, who said, "We came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing we discovered was the Earth." And besides the literalness,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly, that's the overview effect, and translate it for us in terms of of what's going on with the crucible of what's happening in Minneapolis, around the world, with the pandemic situation, but also these phases of life. For instance, my understanding is throughout human history that you reach this third phase of life, which several hundred years ago was 40. Now it's 80, whatever. That you really do start thinking about the big picture. What's my legacy? Have I made a difference? And things of that sort. The challenge of these things do it as well. what do I do with that? How do I, for lack of a better way of expressing it, leverage that to lead me toward these other things where I feel more purposeful with what I'm doing with my life?
Well, I mean, it begs, as I keep saying, everybody's an experiment of one, but I do believe that we're only as good as our practices. We're always practicing something, but is it getting you what you want? Whether that's in the area of health, work, money, we all have practices. And so the universal practice of purpose is that grow and give. So I tell people if they're struggling, I said, look, let me give you a default purpose for a week and try it out and see what happens. And they'll say, okay. And then I give them sort of the science. I say we're wired for purpose, and if they're saying, what does that mean? And I'll tell them about the telomere effect or about the neuroscience of the hippocampus and all of that stuff, just to show that, every idea goes through 3 steps: ridicule, violent opposition, and then it becomes self-evident. And I said, purpose is now self-evident in science. Science can now explain purpose, and it's getting every day new insights. So, okay, I'm with you. And then I say, all right, what do you want me to do, coach? And I'll say, I want you to take out a Post-it like that and write down 2 words: grow and give. What does that mean? That means if you get up in the morning and you ask yourself the morning practice, how am I going to grow and how am I going to give today? And then at the evening, you ask yourself at the end of the day, how did I grow and give today? You hold yourself accountable. It's just one of those practices where you hold yourself accountable. It's not just a thought, it's an action, it's a verb, it's something you did that day to grow and to give. And then let's talk at the end of the week and tell me how that worked for you. And people will say, well, I started to look for ways to grow and give. I said, that's the power of purpose. When you start to be intentional about what it is you want, you start to live life in a direction. And I gave you the direction, but you need to figure out what really gives you direction. So purpose is an aim outside of yourself, and this is one way to look at that aim, and it's a very, very simple way. And the ultimate practice, obviously, is at the end of life, as we get older and we maybe have an illness. I just did a story for my new book with a fellow who has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, who was living perfectly solid life, the good life, the way he wanted it. And then all of a sudden, age 57, he has to stop doing what he's doing and pay attention to his new vision of life with ALS. And he said this, he said, I know that I'm dying, but this is not new knowledge. And it is not ALS. It has always been so. Disease only changes the circumstances and the speed. So we're always dying. We're always, kind of the ultimate is that to live a good life is to live a life where you've left a legacy. Every single person I've interviewed, Paul, thousands of people over and written about it over time, mostly people over the age of 60 or 65. Ask them what would they do differently, and 100% said they want their life to matter. And everybody had a different definition of what that meant. It wasn't about a big legacy thing. And I see all those awards on the wall behind you there. It wasn't necessarily about those awards. It was about relationships. It was about making a dent on the planet in some way that outlived you, and that you're here for a reason. And I think we're wired for purpose. And so spend your life wisely. And so that's what we're really talking about. And then we get sidetracked by or derailed by things like this pandemic, and we need to recalibrate and re-look at things and deal with our anxieties.
It's two big things that you brought up. That first of all, at the beginning of it, of your last response, when you were talking about what to do with it in the ultimate practice,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right. Once you get going, when you get momentum, and where the old cliche of where attention goes, energy flows. It's true. You start thinking about it.
Yeah.
You start thinking about it without trying to think about it when you're driving or when you're brushing your teeth or taking a shower.
Right.
The second thing that especially comes up with Ed Rapp and ties into so much of what we've been, who was the gentleman with ALS who started his effort,
Right.
and with so much else that's going on. What is it that when we're in this crucible, or we're facing death, or we had that near death, we've got cancer or something like that, and we so often hear somebody says, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it became so clear to me what's really important, what really matters. A lot of us realize that, or at least aware of it. Why can so few of us do anything with that ultimately leads to this growth and this give and this purposeful life?
Well, I would challenge by saying more and more people are not in that um, kerfuffle or that in between. When I talked to, it used to be that if you wanted to have a conversation about purpose, talk to somebody 40 or over who had lived through enough experiences and enough pain and enough ups and downs that they had a sense of the broader perspective on life, is what we're talking about here. Now, if you look at millennials or younger, people want to live purposeful lives. They want to live a new vision of a good life, though. I mean, a lot of the outer things are changing, but the inners are not. They're still wanting to belong, and they're still wanting to matter in certain ways. And so I think that is not changing so much. And I think they're making tough decisions about the economics of things. I'd rather try my own thing than work for somebody else doing something I don't believe in, or I don't feel connected, or I don't feel worthy of my time on this earth. So I don't have any easy answers. I have a lot of more questions than I have answers. It's a mystery in a lot of ways. It remains a mystery in a lot of ways. But ultimately, people want their lives to matter. And I know that you've seen this, but for our I was back way pre-pandemic. I was teaching, and I got a message that my mother had a stroke at age 78 and was in intensive care at St. Joseph's Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I was about 4 hours away by a car doing a speech and workshop. And it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I left and I drove home, and the music sounded different and the sunset sounded, because I knew my mother, I thought, was doing quite well. She had had breast cancer surgery 10 years earlier, had taken very good care of herself, but had a massive stroke and was in intensive care and wasn't expected to live through the night. So I got to intensive care and got into the room where she was and and she was taking deep, gasping breaths, really fighting for life, certain ways, if you will. And I asked the nurse who was there if she could just leave me alone, and I just lost it. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in a situation. And then I made this choice, which to this day I think is the right choice. But I got up on the bed and I picked her up and I said, "Mom, thank you. It feels like it's time to go." And when I said thank you, she opened her eyes and took 2 more breaths and died right there. I think all of us, and I even get goosebumps saying this now years later, I think all of us want not necessarily to die that way, but we want to feel like our life, we can be grateful for our life. I think she wanted some sort of completion, that she'd done okay. And then her boys, there was 2 boys, I was one of them, the other one wasn't there at the time, would be okay. And so she was a stay-at-home mom, and that was her deal. And so that was her completion. I think we all want some sort of completion in our lives, to feel like we mattered, and that we mattered to somebody. It doesn't have to be just our family. It could be the broader or bigger community in certain ways. But it does not have to be about awards and about fame or money or any of the other things. It's very simply about relational, emotional connection in that way. And I think that's what we all want. And when I interview adults over the age of 60 or 65, they'll say that in one way or another.
And for me, that's the biggest goal. I mean, you're right about all of this. This was, first of all, prompted by my sons when they were young teens saying, "Get it out of my closet." Now it's my credibility wall. Oh, Paul must know what he's talking about. But you're absolutely right. And that's all past. My number one focus is in those final days. I must admit, it's initially avoidance. I don't want to feel like I blew it, like I didn't go after it, like I didn't mean anything.
Right.
And then I want to have a smile on my face about that.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful story.
And busyness, we can all stay busy. It's kind of keep death at arm's length or keep our anxiety at arm's length if we're busy. But busyness is just a distraction in certain ways. What are you busy about? There's nothing wrong with being busy, but just keeping busy is a way to distract yourself from really feeling what it is that is there, or acknowledging and seeing what the realities are. And I think an authentic, fully lived life has to confront death and dying, but it also has to confront the realities of that we're imperfect and the world is impermanent. And so we deal with our imperfections and its impermanence, and we do the best we can. And
from an earlier conversation, you said, how can I be so bored when I'm so busy?
Right. Yeah. And I do hear that from retired people.
Yeah. And then to me, the greatest realization that I've had in when I first started looking into getting into this space and doing this effort years ago, a lot of it was seeing these possibilities and the longer lifespan and the longer health span and this chance to make it my turn. What I didn't realize until I got into it was how many people were miserable, and seeing how alcoholism and drug abuse and depression and divorce and things of that sort were on the rise. And so much of it is losing relevance, not having a purpose.
Precisely.
And as some people say, I don't matter anymore. Even to my kids, it's kind of like watching your kid play soccer. You can sit there and root for them, but you're not in the game.
Right.
They are.
Yeah.
I want to be in the game. I want to play.
And healthy people who are unhappy. And unhealthy people who are happy.
And I know poor people who are happy and rich people who are frigging miserable.
Right. So what does that tell us? It tells us that there's a mindset, there's a choice in this. Being poor is not, or unhealthy is not what we're choosing, but if that's what it is, then we work the process to get healthy or to get more wealth or whatever. But the fact is that we have to live our lives. We're penciled in here for a short time. And that's what everyone says is that as they get older, wow, where'd that go? I'm still the same person inside, but look in the mirror. That isn't me, is it? And I look different. Well, join the rest of us. We all look different. But the key is what's going on inside with that difference.
And remember, we're all in this together, and nobody gets out alive. So
exactly. Yeah,
Richard, outstanding, useful information, and I know we're going to be talking a lot more. Great start. Thank you. Take care. Be safe.
My pleasure. Thank you for the privilege of doing this. I'm really enjoying it, and I look forward to the next steps in our continued series of talks.
If you like this, there's a lot more on YouTube. Also, there's even more on newwayforward.com. That's newwayfwd.com. There you can subscribe. You'll get a free newsletter regularly. You'll get special updates, and you'll get a free download to help you step by step get going on your new way forward.